let go of control.
All right. I'm glad we got that all settled.
Yes. So good morning. Thanks for joining. Really appreciate it. And we're on our funding stories, episode number 11. Each funding stories episode, we try to bring another great company, give them the stage to talk about who they are, their non-dilutive kind of funding journey, and working a little bit with the government. Maybe a little bit talking about working with us, but essentially giving you the stage to let other people know what you do, what you've done with the government. Let's kind of start with there. Thanks for everybody for hanging out with us. Afterwards, we're gonna share the recording, and kind of let's start with you. We can do it.
All right.
Start there. Yes.
So I'm Merrin Muxlow. I'm head of marketing for Intrepid Automation. We are an industrial 3D printer company. It is a kind of like the cocktail cool 3D print way of explaining it. But moreover, we are a manufacturing solutions provider that just leverages 3D printing. And we kind of dream of a world where the 3D print part is irrelevant because it gets you to the solution that you need faster. And right now, we are working on a really cool project that Eagle Point Funding helped us get with America Makes. America Makes, for those of you not familiar, is an organization that I think it's a manufacturing center of excellence with the DoD or one of those types of acronyms, but they fund a lot of really cool projects, one of which being the Castings and Forgings Impact Project, and that's the one that we're working on right now. So castings and forgings, for anybody that's not familiar with that, it's basically any like metal cast thing. So I read a crazy statistic that 90% of the items that we see that are out in the world have used casting within their manufacture at some point. So something like cars, airplanes, like that's the obvious stuff, right? But then also like the infrastructure for electricity and clean water and energy in general, right? Like all of those use cast metal components, all of it. And so castings and forgings was identified as one of the 4 most pressing national security challenges in the year 2023. Basically, the infrastructure to make these cast metal parts has been slowly waning over the past like 20 to 40 years for a ton of factors that we can get into later. But the idea was that America Makes wanted to kind of raise the red flag and say like, hey, as a nation, we need this metal stuff, right? To be able to like make planes and make vehicles and all this, right? So Intrepid makes hardware that makes an investment casting pattern for metal stuff to get you to the end use metal part up to 10 times faster. So that's what we're working on right now.
So that's fascinating, and we're gonna go deeper into that. Just a little bit, kind of you before you went into Intrepid, you were executive director of TIE. So what initially
Yeah.
made you want to decide to even move to Intrepid for kind of your marketing role?
So TIE it stands for the Indus Entrepreneur, and it has a really cool founding story. It's basically a networking slash support slash resources for entrepreneurs. It was founded by 2 people of Indian descent in Silicon Valley in the 90s, kind of seeing that there were no entrepreneurial organizations that really fit them, right? Being Indian, being expats. And it's TIE is a great resource for anybody kind of in early entrepreneurial journey. And so I had spent quite a bit of time living in India prior and had a little bit of familiarity with TIE. Then moving back to San Diego, got hooked in with them and just talked to startups like all day, every day, which was awesome because it's just people doing cool stuff, creating the good future, like so much excitement about the things that people are building. And one of the programs that we ran at TIE was TIE Young Entrepreneur. We had it, the kind of tagline for it is Shark Tank meets mini MBA for high school students. And so it was high school kids giving their pitches, kind of this whole thing of you can follow the rote stuff for school, but what people really should be doing is the stuff that no one tells you to do, like solving problems, right? So that was super fun. And in that process, recruited a bunch of members. We went from like 10 kids one year to like 100 kids the next year. Just grew really fast. We had a huge, like, amazing team of volunteers. And one of the mentors for one of the teenager groups was Ben Wynn, who is the CEO of Intrepid. And so he and I kind of got to know each other through that. We became friends. So it was kind of a no-brainer to jump and go to Intrepid after hearing all the cool stuff they were working on.
So it was an easy transition.
Of course, yeah. It was, well, I've always kind of been a person that is like in the maker and like make stuff real, and like that hardware, fieldware, like thing space, right? Which is different. Some people really like software stuff, but I like that last mile of like reality delivery, right? Um, where it's,
Reality delivery. It's a good term.
yeah, yeah. I just made that up just now on the spot. But it's that space of I went to this really cool AI breakfast the other morning, and there was a person there that was talking about there are all these fiber optic cables at the bottom of the ocean that's impacting everybody's internet and everybody's everything. And the last piece, that reality delivery piece, is like, how do we get repair stuff to the bottom of the ocean to be able to fix it? Because you have to bring ships with people, with equipment, with like there's so many points of failure, like on all those things, right? Like that is the space that I like love. Um, and that's kind of what 3D printing is. And that's what those are the problems that Intrepid is trying to solve, right? Where it's that last little piece from, yeah, you can topology optimize a shape all you want to like theoretically lightweight a plane, right? But if you can't actually make the thing, it does not matter. So we're trying to actually make the things.
Make the thing faster is kind of what
Mm-hmm.
you're trying to do.
Yes, exactly.
So
Lighter, faster, stronger.
what actually makes it lighter, faster, stronger? So it sounds like that's one of the strongest value propositions in general and in what you do.
Mm-hmm.
What actually makes this that way?
So I guess we can approach this from two angles. So one of them is the part itself, like the end use metal thing. So I'm actually at my home office today and not at my office, but for anybody who's interested, please DM me and I can show you like some really cool pictures, or even looking at some of the Intrepid stuff, where if you have something like, think about like the back of an airplane seat, right? Like that is like a solid piece of plastic, or like different pieces in cars, right? Why does it need to be like that? Like if you've seen 3D printed stuff, it looks like it's all full of holes. It has kind of a shape that's more like a biomimicked shape, right? So some of the brackets that we've made for automotive applications, they actually look like bird wings. 'Cause nature is
Bird
like,
wings.
yeah. So there's a software and a process called topology optimization. And so you can take like the shape that you want it to be, like the back of an airplane seat, or the chassis for a car or something. And then you can program it using an algorithm, or I'm sure people are doing it using AI now, where it's just like mass reduce, mass reduce, mass reduce to get rid of all the material that it would take to make it. And so you can get it to make like way less plastic, and then, or way less metal. And then in that, it's much, much lighter, right? If you're trying to do something that goes fast or something that's in the air, every pound matters. So in that way, the end use piece can be actually lighter. And a lot of those shapes can only be made with 3D printing, right? Like there's no way to actually create that type of geometry with conventional tooling or injection molding or conventional manufacturing processes, right? So that's one way, like the end use piece is lighter. And then another way is that the process itself is actually lighter too. So we work in the investment casting space. We mainly make investment casting patterns. That's where you pour hot metal into a ceramic shell, right? So the way you get the ceramic shell typically is you make a master of the thing you want to make. Say it's like, this is like my little camera stand. Say it's like in this kind of a shape, right? So you make one, and then you make a tool that can make that little piece out of wax, like for a 1 of 1, right? And then you dip each wax piece in the ceramic, burn it out, and then pour the metal in there. So that's so many resources, right? Making the tool, sometimes that takes years. Sometimes you can't even make it in the shape you want, so you have to compromise on that, right? Using all the wax, like all the stuff, right? It's long, it's expensive, things mess up. Think about like the physics of wax. You can't really make something big. You can't make something where it's going to stick to itself necessarily, right? And so what Intrepid does is we figured out, we have an acrylate, methacrylate resin that mimics the properties of wax. It's low CTE, low ash, but you just directly print that thing. So you can go to production with no tooling. And that's huge for tons of different companies. Like, firstly, you don't put your IP at risk, right? By contracting with some other tooling company, by like shipping the shape of your thing, all around, sometimes even to maybe China, right? Um, that's a big deal. And then the other one is
That
it
is a
just
big
saves
deal.
so much time, right? Yeah, especially if you're doing ITAR parts or parts that are like really sensitive, where it's for aviation, avionics, aerospace, private space, that kind of thing, right? Like you don't want anybody knowing what you're working on. And so if you have if you have your own in-house casting operation, in-house foundry, and you can house one of these printers there, then it's completely own your own production. You can print exactly the pattern for the thing you need. And especially if you're working in private aerospace, which is a big niche for us, it's like, okay, let's print 5 of the shape that we think are going to be good, and then test them all, cast them, pour them in metal, whichever ones do not blow up, or that blow up less, or that like kind of work better, then we'll iterate on that, right? And you can do that fast. You don't have to get a tool made for each individual one that then you're like, oh shoot, now we got to change that geometry, right?
It sounds like you're not only reducing step, you're enabling to go directly to casting.
Exactly. So it's direct to production, toolingless production. And so even with that, like, in manufacturing, especially, people are kind of like really tied to, well, we did it this way, and often that's for a reason. And so another good asset is bridge production. So it's where, okay, we're waiting for the tool to get made. We spent tons of money on this tool, sometimes like millions of dollars. But we want to, in the meantime, make stuff, right? Like make the item before we get the tool. So it enables on-demand production for anything. The wheelhouse for 3D printing is anything that is really complex, really customized. So like if you have infinite SKUs for something, or something where you just need it really, really fast, right? So that the middle of that Venn diagram is it's ideal for our solution.
So you're saying a lot of traditional manufacturers have resisted the change. How do they respond to what you do when a lot of people in the advanced manufacturing are saying similar things?
Mhm.
How hard or easy is it to stand out?
Um, it really depends. I would say, with customers, clients, and anyone you're going to partner with in business, it's a relationship at the end of the day. And
Mhm.
so you do have to be kind of on the same page in terms of like, what future are we creating? Are we on board with the right way to make this? Do we think that this is going to work? Is this a good idea? And like, it's a really future forward solution, being able to 3D print for metal casting. And so if you're aligned on, um, hey, if you see the value, and we have of course a process where it's like, this geometry is going to work, we've tested it, all this stuff, right? um the ones that get it really, really get it, and it can
They
just
really get it.
turbocharge, yeah, the production, right? And it's almost that delta where, um in the ex in the explaining it, you can kind of see that light go on, where it's like, oh wait, we don't have to have any of that. We don't have to have the wax room. We don't have to wait for the tool. We can, right? Um, which is pretty cool.
Interesting. So, kind of where, but before we dive into kind of what you're doing in the R&D and on the Ludo, where do you see or where do you think the company's going to go the next year or two? A little bit of the goals of how the future horizons look.
So for the America Makes project right now, we're doing an on-ramp. We've done the patterns. We've met with good success there. We're doing an on-ramp to ceramic production. So that's for printed cores, which is, it's like a little piece that you put inside the shell that the metal has to go around, right? If you think about how to mold something, sometimes there's like a little hollow center that you need, right?
Okay.
And then printing the outside, the outer piece, the shell directly, which is the project we earned with the help of Eagle Point. And so that we're increasingly seeing that people like and want, where it's like patterns now, and then you can have the machine that makes the patterns. And then our user interface is also really easy. It's designed to be that way, where it's like industrial components. You don't need to be a PhD to operate it. It's not like super complicated, right? We're going for the whole thing of like, you know, print. All of our founders were from HP, so it's the idea of like click print, and then there you go, right?
Okay.
So kind of with that, when people get how easy it is with patterns, then the idea is that once we've done the sufficient R&D with ceramics, and when that's a really mature solution, we'll have patterns. We have a printable wax for, you know, smaller stuff, and then we'll have the ceramics. And if people are familiar with how our machine works, then it's kind of like you have this suite of solution, and then we're just a foundry hardware provider at that point. We always talk about, we don't want to be, even though we leverage 3D print, we don't necessarily want to be associated to it. It has kind of a bad
Okay.
rap, not working. A lot of the machines are lemons. The customer service is terrible. And so we're really differentiating from that, where it's, we're just trying to give people like a turnkey solution to make the parts they need faster.
Good. Click and print.
Exactly, right? And then fully automate the post-processing. So that's kind of like a dirty secret of 3D printing, is all the stuff you have to do after the print itself takes way more time, way more energy, sometimes than the actual printing. So when people come in and sell these printers, they're like, oh yeah, we made that in like 12 hours. And it's like, well, yeah, but then it had to sit in basically an oven for like 24 more. And if any weird thing, it's like so sensitive, right? Like if you open the door a tiny bit, it will mess it up. And so you basically have to have a person sitting babysitting it. And so then there's that labor, right? We want to just not do any of that. All of our stuff is designed to be really industrial, really robust, where it's like a robot arm pulls it out of the printer, pulls it into the post process, and a person doesn't need to do anything unless it pings you, right?
And that's something that people don't understand. They intuitively go just to 3D printing, but they don't
Yeah.
calculate what happens afterwards. And you have to show them
Yeah,
all of it.
exactly. So I would say like a lot of like legacy SLA, and especially for this, and a lot of legacy 3D print, it's kind of a bait and switch, and that really surprised me getting into the
A bait and
industry.
switch.
So yeah, like I went to one 3D print facility and I saw a pallet of failed prints that they were throwing away. Like they paid for that. They paid for all that material. It was like very expensive, like per kilogram of the resin, right? And so that's machine basically downtime because you're throwing away the product. And then that's waste that a lot of the time, if it's resin waste, it's hazardous and you have to dispose of it in an expensive way. And then it's parts that you can't even use, right? And that's because the printers weren't reliable. They would fail. And the joke was every part comes out with $100 bill stapled to it. Because it's like, that's the cost, that's the failure cost, right? Um, and so that is a big problem that we're trying to solve for as well, right? Where it's the post-processing needs to be bundled in to what it is. And if anybody watching wants to come see our machines in Intrepid, like we have some video on the website. We're launching our beautiful new website and brand shortly. But we have it's all internally automated. So when
Okay.
people quote you a part at Intrepid versus something else, it's like that's for the finished thing that's coming out. It's not for like, oh wait, but then you also have to think about the post-processing. Oh wait, then you also have to think about the tech that's babysitting the machine. Oh wait, then there's also the field print costs, all that stuff, right?
There's a lot of constraints that add up to seemingly faster process, not actually processing.
Exactly. And so over time, like the 3D printing industry, they use the word, and I don't know if this is just like a tech thing or if it's a 3D printing thing, but they use this whole thing where they're like, we're revolutionizing manufacturing. And it's like revolutions often end in like guillotines and stuff. Like that's not necessarily good.
Fair. I did not
Right?
expect that one.
And so it's right. And so you don't want to, and plus like people who manufacture, they do not want to revolutionize their production because that means that like you're throwing out all the stuff that they have invested their capital equipment budgets in, to then just replace it with the new capital equipment, right?
Yeah.
That's not something that people are, keen to do. And so it's like 1 degree turns. And that's why we kind of focused on using the 3D print just for the production consumables, like for the patterns, for the cores, for the molds, rather than it's a Star Trek replicator. Let's make everything with this. That is years and years and years away. And people that are in the 3D print space need to start being honest about how much that actually costs.
And it's almost like you took the most annoying constraint in manufacturing and just focused on that.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So, and that was strategic, right? So that whole thing with the castings and forging supply chain, I mean, that's a major issue. I mean, think about like when countries like can't make stuff, right?
Mhm.
So if your production engines, there's a book that I'm reading right now. I think it's called Forged in Fire. It's about like during World War II, how basically the industrial base just got like turned like way to level 10, from American ingenuity and all this stuff. It's like super patriotic. But there's really something to that, right? Like if you end up being a country that can't own your own production, like most of South America in the 1970s, or like, how the US government kind of like stopped the export of things to like Chile, like in the, early 70s, and some other countries too, right? Your economy begins to fail. Like if you can't get like
Yeah.
parts for buses, parts for trains, parts for airplanes, if airplanes break and fall out of the sky, like people lose confidence in regulatory industries. And like all of that is that last mile of reality, right? Like you have to have this
Yeah.
metal stuff. It has to work. You have to be able to get it. Like COVID showed us that like
Exactly.
supply chain problems cause big problems.
Yes. And suddenly you can't rely on a globalized, optimized supply chain when
Exactly.
ships aren't leaving the docks.
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, think about it like this. Like, what if next week, all of a sudden, we couldn't have any imports of things? How would the US really fare? Right? If
Yeah.
especially for metals, which is the space that I kind of know about, right? And like if we only could use domestic production to make
Mhm.
every metal replacement part for everything for the US military, for everything for infrastructure, like local, federal, state infrastructure, um, it would not be pretty.
Won't
So
be nice
that's
for a
what we're
little
trying to
while.
get. What's that?
So it won't be nice for a little while.
Yeah, exactly. It would take quite a bit to be able to turn that dial all the way up, right? It would be difficult.
So let's talk a little bit about kind of the America Makes as a part of the federal agencies. What made that interesting? What made non-dilutive and kind of these types of programs? Because it sounds like you're very commercially faced for
Yeah.
manufacturing industry. What made this a priority working with the federal government or engaging in these types of grants and programs and contracts?
So one of the biggest applications that we've seen for our technology is those casting patterns. And one of the given that it's a big national security issue, we realized our value like within that supply chain.
Mhm.
And so working with a federal grant agency kind of gives you a shorter path to be able to engage with those agencies where your technology will be firstly of value and second of impact, right? Um, and like our CEO is an immigrant. All of us are very for lack of a better word, very like into and enthusiastic about this idea of domestic manufacturing, localized production, right? And so many cool things have come out of military tech, right? And so we just kind of thought of it as a good place to start. Also, as a small startup, and something where it's like hardware is hard and you need kind of a lot of support when you're making hardware. It's like the magic of 3D printing. It's like how to make like physics and chemistry and light like all get together to like do exactly the thing you want, like at exactly the same time, right? So non-dilutive funding, as much of it as we could get, was of very high value.
It, it, it it sounds like it's a special path that's relevant for the company. Like this is part of the goals and priorities.
Exactly. And we've also, exactly. And we also did this project in collaboration with some different foundries, metal casting foundries, and
Okay.
with the Investment Casting Institute. So the Investment Casting Institute is an awesome group. It's a trade association for people who work in metal casting, investment casting specifically. It's that casting process. And
Okay.
we've had an awesome relationship with them over the years. And with in talking with them, right? It's kind of like, how can you put all of your voices together and be like, hey, look, this is like a problem that we see, and tons of other people are maybe not noticing. There's a person that I follow online, actually. I don't know if I should call her out by name. But she writes a lot of really, really good posts about this whole thing, about the defense industrial base, and
Okay.
um, about like, hey, is anybody else noticing this? Like, it's going to be really hard to get metal stuff unless we start ramping up our tech to be able to do this, right? And the ICI has just been very future forward in noticing that, right? So it was a good opportunity to work with them, a good opportunity to test our tech with foundries, because they
Okay.
are that last mile of reality, being able to actually make the cast metal part, right? And they're so important to our economy as a nation.
What was it like during the process, finding the program, evaluating it, submitting to it until you actually were awarded? Like, what was that process like? Some of the companies and people here aren't, necessarily familiar. So, can you talk about that process a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So we became an America Makes member like somewhat early on, just for marketing reasons. And the folks that run it are great. And I've run into them at conferences and all that kind of stuff. So I would get the emails, project call, right? They Not so many of them were about metal casting, which is where our niche is. And then luckily, last summer they had a good meeting in Milwaukee that was after there was a release from the Biden administration, like some kind of a brief, right? Where it was like, hey, metal casting, this is going to be a problem, right? And so they had this meeting on castings and forgings in Milwaukee where they brought industry. There were people from like, Oshkosh, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, like all these, big OEMs, and then little startups like us, right? And then people like American Foundry Society, Investment Casting Institute, and such. And we all kind of literally went and sat around a table and were like, okay, so how do we get to prove that this will work? And it's like science fair, right? Like hypothesis, experiment, conclusion to get what we need at the end. Um, and so I went to those meetings, met a bunch of different cool people. Joe Fritz from the Casting Institute called me up and said, hey, we're going to apply for one of these projects. You want to do it together? And so I was like, sure, that's awesome. Would love to work with you guys on that. By the way, we had just applied for an AFWorks using Eagle Point that we ended up not getting. But it was a little bit sideways to what our tech value proposition is. So it's all good. It wasn't specifically for castings. And so then we ended up writing the project call with Joe and with our grant writer, Melissa from Eagle Point. And Melissa was amazing to work with. It was pretty funny. We were writing the technical volume and kind of like getting it down to the wire. And one of the people who was going to input some info ended up deleting the entire table of contents. This is like 2 days before the project call was due. And we're like,
2 days
no.
before.
Yeah. So it went down to the wire, right? Where it's like turning it in at the 11th hour. That said, like I always knew we were going to win it just because it was exactly a fit for us.
It was a good fit. There was confidence in it. It was a team working well.
Exactly. Exactly. We had a great team. We were working with a couple of other different great foundries that Kovac, Castings, and O'Fallon, a few others that we've worked with over the years. And it's nice to be able to kind of just do a science fair project with people.
So talk about the process of actually finding the calls, reviewing them, whatever you can share, the process. How does that, like, is somebody in the audience something that they should know, or how they should prepare? Anything that you can share about the process? Yes, of working with us, that is great. Also, kind of the process of actually finding the calls, writing them, reviewing them, the good, the bad.
I would say, so subscribe to all the different calls that you would want. With Eagle Point, she helped us pick them. So we would get the opportunity report. We would just here. I got a weird screen coming up. Sorry about that. 1 second. Got to close this out. Like you get those funny pop-ups sometimes. It's like taking up the whole screen. I'm like, oh no, is this going to crash me? Do I need a software update?
Don't sign up. Don't put in your credit card details. Just
I know, right? I know. So Melissa would come to us with an opportunity report. I actually found this one just because we kind of helped write the project call, so I knew it was going to come up before it was flagged on her outgoing. So we had a lot of time to prep for it, which was also good about the working relationship between EPF and Intrepid is I was like, hey, they're going to release this project call. I know they are because I was at the meeting where they were writing them. So it's going to be, pretty good for us. And so then as soon as ICI got on board, we just kind of started working on it. And we get a template for tech volume. Like I kind of brought in, I'm an attorney by training, so I can write, documents where it's like pegged to specific language and all that kind of stuff. And so Melissa doing the outlining, I would go through and edit. She would say, okay, this needs to be more robust. It really took about a month to write the whole thing between us. And because it was, I mean, it was big. It's like, it has, you have to deep dive into the specifics of like the test geometries, the process, America Makes has a very strict reporting requirement. So as this project finishes, we have to go do webinars about it and go basically do like press junkets about your project. And so we're going to be doing that, like following it up. We're actually looking at applying for another one, this new impact project call that is Rapid Casting Iteration Challenge, which is like exactly our wheelhouse. And so I have to say that it was a really smooth process from start to finish, and it really equipped me to feel confident in applying for other ones.
Feel confident.
Yeah, and apply like where it seemed daunting at first, right? Where it's like, oh, real like I'm not a grant writer, right? I can write, but like writing a 53-page proposal that includes half of it being a technical volume, that's daunting, right? For like one person
Scary.
at a small startup. Yeah, exactly. But being able to have help with that, especially for someone who knows what a winning proposal looks like, is also very helpful, right? Because it's almost laughable. Like my first efforts at it are so funny because like before, when I was just doing like a full DIY, I was like, here's our pitch deck. It's like, no, that's not what they want,
Thank you.
like at all.
Not exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. It was so naive. It was so naive. Um, but yeah, it really does have to be like very technically robust and follow the exact format that they want and that will resonate with them, right? Like it's somebody that's taking a red tipped pen to the thing that you're going to be working on. It's not just like, hey, here's our cool tech. It works. Give it a try, right?
Yeah. You have to fit exactly what they need. Even if your tech is great, it has to fit how they want to look at it and examine.
Exactly. And to be fair, that actually really helped us in our proposals for customer facing stuff going forward as well.
For
Just
customers.
because in the way that we wrote the technical volume, I learned a lot about our technology. And so then that that carried over into how we both state and amplify our value proposition, right? Where it's like, oh, okay, this matters, right? Like all those little pieces, right? Yeah, it's not just of value for this project, it's also of value to this other partner that we're engaging with, right?
It helped refine the thinking of how you describe it to other people.
Absolutely, absolutely. Like my marketing language got better in writing it.
Interesting. So
Yeah, it's like an ancillary benefit, right?
you do it for the award to receive projects and cooperate. It sounds like second order effects that you're fond of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it's like it's one of those things where it's like the more you do it, the better it gets. So if you have to be able to write your abstract where it's like this is valuable because, right?
Mhm.
And then going through that process and then with somebody who's submitted these proposals before, when her eye is on it and saying like, I still don't get it, right?
Mm.
It makes you realize that like, when you're in something, when especially if it's like, hey, I talk about like metal casting all the time. And so most of the people that I talk to, they know about metal casting.
Yeah.
And and so how do you explain this to somebody who does not know about investment casting at all? Like who doesn't know about SLA patterns versus wax room? It's like there's a shorthand when you talk to people in your own industry where it's like, oh, you said like toolingless bridge production, like without a wax room. Anybody who works with us in investment casting, they're going to be like, cool. But the average person is going to be like, what did you say? Um,
So it sounds like Melissa helped you refine the thinking. How do you describe it to a non-technical person or not necessarily an industry expert, which could fit in grants, but also on the outside?
Exactly, exactly. And so then that helps with like a funding thing in general too, right? Because then that will refine your pitch to when you're talking to stakeholders that are not technical, right? When they are like executive sponsors, they are like, you will need to explain a wax tool costs this much money usually and costs this much time usually, right? Because that's perhaps not their specific domain, right? Like they have a zoom out view on that situation. And and so it gets you to the end goal explanation like a lot faster, being able to write something like that. And so Melissa was a great eye, and she was also infinitely patient, because we would have good like
Infinitely
for
patient.
deliverables. So she wrote the schedule, right? And I would joke with some of my colleagues where it's like first Melissa will like, because you have to it's for drawings and technical volume edits and cost share edits and those kinds of things, right? And it's a big project. And so she initially would be like, okay, this is what I need by X day with our chart and all this kind of stuff. And then next I would get an email in bold. Then it would be if it's one stage late. If it's another stage late, then an email in bold and caps. And then last is email in bold caps with red. And I'm like, I can't get an email from Melissa in red. Like that's bad.
Fourth email is a
Helps you push
hammer.
on. Yes. Yeah. And then it helps push on the engineers because then it's like if you send them something where it's like, hey, she's emailing me in all red. Like I need this.
Nice. Tell me a little bit, kind of what do you see as next step on this project America Makes, and what do you see kind of the next step in your federal work and as a company for our time as well?
Oh, okay. So we have some engagements with, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say, but with a research institute that's within the .gov DoD space that it's at early stages, but it's looking
Nice.
like it will amp up. And it's
Mhm.
for exactly what's in our wheelhouse, which is the casting patterns, which is wonderful. We then too have completing this project with America Makes. Uh, really doing some internal audits right now, seeing if we're going to be applying for the Impact 2.0, which that decision matrix is infinitely easier given that we already won this one, because now we know what the project entails, right? So basically we may apply for another one. And that being made infinitely easier, having been through the process already. And then as this project ramps up, it really does give us like just kind of super credibility, right? Being able to say, like, we got this grant. We have now a process for testing the materials that are available within our solution, where we have an on-ramp for foundries looking to produce quickly, lightweighted stuff, and the advanced products of tomorrow, like basically a threefold like tiered solution where it's patterns, wax, and then on-ramp to ceramics, which is in heavy R&D right now, tested, like kind of, I don't want to say yet publicly, but like it's you can it's like a very transparent R&D journey, right? Um, which
Transparent.
which is like really, yeah, which is really, really helpful, especially in 3D printing, because so many, oh, it's ready, it works, it's ready, it works, and then it's not. And so it helps that we have these other foundries, this other investment casting institute. They can be like, yeah, when they say they're working on this, they are, and it's like pretty ready, right?
Not overselling it and then disappointing people who gonna end up with it.
Exactly. That's that level of like transparent R&D is sorely needed within the additive manufacturing 3D print
It,
ecosystem.
it sounds like it's a company policy, very transparent, but you get what you ask for.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that you know, we have a kind of at Intrepid, we have that quote from Henry Ford on the wall where it's utility is success. So we only want to have like mutual upsides, because we don't really make money like just selling somebody a machine and being like, see ya, have fun with that. We make money when the machine is used, like when it's using resin, when they are
Mhm.
making products, right? It's an upward spiral, a mutual upside, right? Which is that I think is kind of the only way to do business. Otherwise, people, take advantage. It's
If the
you
client
want to be true collaborate.
if the client didn't sell, you didn't sell.
Exactly. And that's exactly the case. If it doesn't work and the client's not using it, then we don't get anything out of that, right?
Yeah. So I think we got everything that we need. This was a ton of fun. Thank you so much. We're gonna let everybody know. Send us the new website link. We're gonna add it in kind of the newsletter where we add. Where can people and should contact you if they're interested in knowing more, um, or trying to collaborate? What's the best channel?
You know what? You can go ahead and email me directly at mmuxlow@intrepidautomation.com, and I'll send you that email too. And I'm speaking at Rapid TCT, giving a technical presentation about this, where it's about 3D print automation. So all of our systems are automatable. We have one that's fully internally automated, and then another that's automatable. It's larger, so it's designed to be modular and flexible. It's configurable. And that's going to be in June of this year. June 25th, I think, is my talk. It's in LA. And I'll video it and I'll put it up. Anybody that wants slides or anything about Intrepid, hit me up, either email. I'm easy to find on LinkedIn, so I don't have to give you something long to type in. Like, my name is Merrin Muxlow, Muxlow. I'm likely the only one. I have a huge photo of a 3D printed casting pattern in my background, so you'll know it's me.
All right, Merrin, thank you so much. This was a lot of fun. Folks here will be sending the recording afterwards, so feel free to watch it again. Like, this is a Lord of the Rings trilogy, and again, thank you so much. This was great.
Thank you so much, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. I'll reclaim host, and
All right.
all right. So wait, let's pause the recording.